later in life. But of course, that journey doesn't always go to plan, which is why plenty are thinking about preserving their fertility by freezing their eggs. So what's involved? How safe is it? And what happens in an emergency like the one we're in now? Fertility specialist Dr. David Knight joins us to answer those questions, along with Franine, who's had her eggs frozen. Thank you both for joining us here on Studio 10. What is the right age for a woman to freeze her eggs?
That's a great question. I don't think there necessarily is a right age, because it's important that we treat people in their own circumstances. The literature that people publish talk about freezing eggs and whether they use them later down the track. So the earlier you freeze eggs in an age, the more likely you are to get pregnant, but the less likely you are to use them. And the later you freeze them, the less likely you are to get pregnant and more likely. The sweet spot seems to be around 35 to 37.
Okay. Franny, I've got to say, I don't think I'm out of line asking you this question because we are talking about age and freezing eggs. How old are you and why did you decide to freeze your eggs?
Okay, well, I am slightly older than the 35 age group.
You are not.
And well, I'll tell you my story. I probably, like a lot of women out there in their early 20s, I focused on my career, I focused on my university, and I wanted to go and conquer the world and go overseas. And I found that instead of 1 year, I spent 10 years over there. So when I came back, I was no longer in my 20s anymore. So I hadn't prioritised on having a family, and I guess to take the stress out of that, I thought, look, this is a great time to freeze my eggs. They're viable, and I did just that. Yeah.
Franine, it's such a common feeling, and I know someone who's done exactly the same thing. What are you kind of thinking? Is it something where you're thinking you're just waiting for the right guy to come along, and then you'll have those eggs to be able to have kids together, or are you thinking it's something you might just do by yourself if that doesn't happen, or what are you imagining? How are you imagining it's going to go forward?
Yeah, well, essentially, I just wanted to make sure I didn't really have to worry about that at this point in time. So in my mind, I just figured, well, I had good viable eggs. So in a sense, I'm just freezing a part of myself and suspending that in time. So I've got an ageless part of me that's ready to go when the time is right. So
what is the procedure?
Yeah, so essentially we turn up to Demeter. I turned up to Demeter Fertility. It doesn't feel like a clinic as such. It's got a nice vibe about it, so you don't feel too nervous. And you go and talk to the nurses, you talk to the clinicians, and they talk you through the process. So
what is that process? Physically, what is the process?
It's essentially doing an IVF cycle, just as any woman would do. So taking the medication, and at the time that they ask you to take it, and then when you're ready to go, you go in for the egg collection, and that's a really simple process with Demeter specifically, because there isn't a need to go under general anaesthetic. It can be done in clinic under local, so you can actually be awake and watch the process being done, and it's very, very quick.
So they actually have. Is it under local anaesthetic and a needle or retrieval instrument into
Correct.
Your ovaries?
Correct. Yeah. So you slightly sort of, if you choose to take some painkillers, you can. But I actually found after my second cycle I didn't really want to or need to, because I wanted to go to work that same day. So.
And Doctor, if we just turn to you, if people in the clinic are having to self-isolate at home, who's looking after the eggs? Do they need looking after? Are they guaranteed?
Oh, absolutely. Of course we look after them. These are the very linchpin of the business of fertility and preservation. So the eggs are taken at the egg collection, which is a procedure that takes around about 15 to 20 minutes from woe to go. And the eggs goes to our laboratory, and they are then prepared and frozen at the time. So from that particular point, they go into the storage tanks once they've been frozen, and they remain there and can remain there for, at this stage, up to 10 years before we have to ask people whether they want to continue to freeze them.
And how much does all of this cost? Can it be claimed on Medicare or private health insurance?
At our particular clinic, it's all done outside of hospital, so private health insurance doesn't come into it. Medicare certainly can cover a proportion of people that come through. The Australian government has a series of rules, so that would be very individual. But there certainly are circumstances where Medicare can be part of that process.
Doctor, is there a difference between an 18-year-old egg and a 40-year-old egg?
There certainly is. The 18-year-old egg has a chance of about 1 in 2 of creating a baby, and the 40-year-old egg has a chance of about 1 in 10 of creating a baby. So there are significant changes that occur in our body as we get older that changes how we respond. For example, the 18-year-old can probably run 100 metres faster than the 40-year-old. So our bodies just don't work the same way as we get older than they did before, and eggs are no different.
Good luck, Franine, with your quest to become a mum one day. I hope you get your heart's desire.
Yeah, and look, if that doesn't come to fruition, then that's not a problem. I've actually thought about that, and I've done the process. And if there is someone out there that might want to take those eggs, they are there for donation.
Oh, that's a really gorgeous gesture.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Franine, and thank you to Dr. David Knight as well for joining us here on Studio 10.
Thanks very much, guys.
Now, up next.